This lesson is a lesson on clarity. It's how to strengthen sentences, make them more clear and direct. One of the main ways to accomplish that is to focus on using good verbs. And so this lesson is on verb power, because the verb is really the engine of the sentence. That's where the power comes from, and that's where the action of the sentence comes from. There's a few guidelines here for how to strengthen verbs and how to avoid weak verbs. The first guideline here is to avoid overusing forms of the verb to be, such as is, are, was, were, am, being, and been. Now, avoid overusing is the key there. There is nothing wrong with these verbs. They're part of our language. We use them all the time, and there's nothing wrong with them. But as you're revising and you're trying to strengthen clarity, it's worth looking at sentences that use these verbs and see if they could be replaced by something stronger and more direct that conveys action. Because to be verbs, as has been stated in a previous lesson, act kind of like an equal sign. So you are a nice dresser is another way of saying you equal a nice dresser. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. It's just it doesn't really convey much action or imagery. So weak would be, the sun was really bright on the snow. Nothing wrong with that grammatically, but if we wanted to strengthen that, we could choose a verb that actually conveyed some action. We locate the to be verb, and we can change it. The sun shone brightly on the snow. It strengthens it. Now we know we have a subject, and that subject is actually doing something in the sentence. So weak. Being a nice person is a good way to be happy. So in this short sentence, we actually have 3 cases of the to be verb being used. So how could we rephrase this without so many to be verbs, or maybe none, so that it's more clear, direct, and just stronger? Kindness leads to happiness. Look at that. I mean, it actually conveys the same thought, but instead we have a very clear subject, and that subject is doing something. Kindness leads to happiness. It says the same thing as the previous sentence, but with fewer words and in a more direct way by focusing on subject-verb. Another thing in strengthening verbs is to avoid passive voice constructions. Now, these are called passive because they don't directly name the action or the doer of the action. So, for example, the election's outcome was decided by the Supreme Court. How could we rephrase this so that we have a subject and that subject is actually doing something? So if we look at this sentence is really about the Supreme Court and what it was doing. And what was it doing? So let's look at a reconstruction here. The Supreme Court decided the election's outcome. Now we have a strong subject, the Supreme Court. Decided is the verb. It's an actual verb. It's not just was. So this sentence is stronger and clearer for that pretty simple revision. Another example. The suspect was being held in custody by the police. We want to get rid of that was being and by, and so we'll put the police in the driver's seat here. They'll be the center of the action, and what are they doing? The police held the suspect in custody. More clear, more direct. Accusations were made and feelings were hurt. So this is a classic example of how passive voice construction avoids responsibility, really. It makes it harder to discern meaning. And often we'll find politicians using passive voice constructions, especially when they are asked questions that are unrehearsed, like in a press conference. You'll hear lots of passive voice constructions because they're just not, it's less direct, and it's a way of kind of convoluting answers to questions. So accusations were made and feelings were hurt. We could almost imagine someone saying this when they were really trying to avoid naming names in a statement. So who made the accusations? Whose feelings were hurt? The supervisor accused his coworkers and hurt their feelings. Now this is a better sentence, a much better sentence. We know who was doing the accusations, and we know whose feelings were hurt here. Okay, so we also want to avoid unnecessary helping verbs. Helping verbs are forms of be, have, can. That's just to name a few of them. And they perform a legitimate role, but we don't want to use them unnecessarily. So we have the day had been hot. That can just be the day was hot. It's shorter, more direct. We had worked all day and had had a good time. We can get rid of that and just say we worked all day and had a good time. She had been being rude all night. Can change to she was rude all night. I realize that that second construction there uses a to be verb, and we could maybe strengthen that even more by choosing a different verb, but at least it's an improvement over that first example. So we're not really talking about errors here. Even the poor examples, they were not necessarily incorrect. They were just less effective. They weren't as strong as they could have been. So verb power is about choosing strong verbs, having an actual clearly stated subject doing the action of those verbs, and it's a way of really strengthening sentences. There's no need to go through your paper and eliminate all helping verbs or all be verbs, but you do want to take another look at them and see if there is a way of stating them more directly and rewriting the sentence so that it's stronger and clearer and just more enjoyable to read.